I am here to provide some updates on some of the major issues that are facing Florida, particularly with respect to insurance. I think we all have lived through the last 4 years and seen the cost of everything really go up. Groceries are more expensive than ever. Housing is more expensive than ever. Auto insurance was the #1 inflationary item nationwide in 2024. Average increase was 20%. And then, of course, property insurance has been going up nationwide, but that's been an issue that's roiled the state of Florida, being hurricane prone for many decades. And so I'm pleased to announce that very soon, Citizens Property Insurance will be announcing that 73% of Miami-Dade primary homeowners will receive a premium decrease in 2025. And the average decrease for those Citizen policyholders will be 6.3%, which you figure 2024, we had inflation in 2024 overall, and it's accelerated at the end of 2024. So even if you just kept things normal, you'd likely see increases in a lot of these things. And yet, for Miami-Dade, 73% of those Citizen policyholders will receive a decrease, average of 6.3%. 52% of Citizens homeowners in Broward County will also be receiving a decrease, and that'll be an average of 4.5%. So overall, statewide, most of the decreases are concentrated in South Florida, but overall, a decrease will be merited for over 20% of Citizens policyholders statewide. So we appreciate Citizens doing that. I'm proud to be able to make that announcement today, and that's something that's very, very meaningful. Can also announce that the major companies who provide auto insurance in the state of Florida are also going to be providing premium decreases for 2025. So far the filings are as follows. Geico, 10.5% decrease statewide for auto insurance. Progressive, 8.1% decrease statewide for auto insurance. And State Farm, 6% decrease statewide for auto insurance. And we have others that are going to be doing things very soon. So we anticipate to see decreases for USAA and maybe some other companies as well. And then finally, there was just a report put out by S&P Global on homeowners insurance nationwide for 2024. And Florida had the lowest premium increases in homeowners insurance in 2024 out of all 50 states based on their analysis. Now, that just shows you this insurance issue is not limited to Florida. Like a lot of times people will focus because we've had issues for the last, couple decades, but then also it's like we do so well in all these other things. We're paying down state debt, we have a big surplus, we're cutting taxes, education, low crime, all these things. And so they got to find something, right? So they do. But nationwide, 49 other states had higher average premium increases than Florida did in 2024. And January rate filing so far, if you look at the last 30 days as these companies file the rates that they're going to do, the average increase for property insurance rates over the last 30 days was simply 0.2%. So almost zero that we've seen over the past 30 days. If you look at the 180-day average right now for January 2025, the average increase was 1.1%. And if you compare that a couple years ago, you were seeing average increases like 20%. And so you've seen a stabilization. You also have 11 new companies have entered the market in the state of Florida over the last 2 years. California, that's not happening, and other states, it's not happening. You see companies that are leaving. You're never going to have a stable market if people don't want to come in and do business here. So we said we got to have a stable market. We got to fix some of the things. We can't control storms. We can't control inflation nationwide. There's a lot of things that are beyond our control, but providing a solid marketplace is one. And what happens is, if some company's overcharging you, if you have 4 others to choose from that can give you a better deal, you choose it, and then people vote with their feet, and there's a competition for your business. If you're in a place like we were years ago where you may not have any option, will they raise it? What can you do? You have no other option to be able to do. So I really, really think it's good that we've had 11 companies come in. And so I think the upshot of all this is not something that just happened. The legislature here in Florida has done more to address these issues over the last many years than any time in the history of the state of Florida. You know, there'd be major things that are done, and sometimes people act like none of this has happened. The reality is, when you're dealing with a complex market, you can't just do something and all of a sudden flip a switch and problem is solved, because there's so many factors that go into this. But just think about what's been done over the last 6 years. 2019, the legislature passed and I signed HB 7065. What that did was it addressed this, really it turned into a cottage industry of assignment of benefits. And so you have an insurance policy, you make a claim, you want to get the claim paid. Assignment of benefits, a third party would come in, they'd ask you to assign the claim for them, and they would do litigation and they would try to run up the costs and do whatever they can to benefit themselves. Well, that's not something that's going to be good if you want to have stable or lower premiums. That's going to help drive the cost up. And so we were able to do that. The legislature did that. And that had a modest effect on one very small aspect of how Florida's market was not doing well. Then in 2021, the legislature passed HSB 76. What that did was it tightened the eligibility for citizens. I mean, some people shouldn't be on Citizens. You want to make sure it's focused on insurer of last resort, but particularly for lower and middle income people and not for upper income people. It also tightened the deadline to file claims from 3 years to 2 years. And the reason is you had Hurricane Irma, you'd go through the aftermath of that, and people thought the market was stable a year, 18 months after, and then you still have all the litigation claims happen years after the fact. It was hard. Businesses didn't want to come into the market if they thought they had a never-ending 3-year period where you could have a lot of this litigation. And so that was a modest change as well. Then in 2022, you saw really significant reforms passed by the Florida legislature. First one was eliminating this roofer scam. You know, you would have situations where people would go, there'd be a shingle on the roof, and they'd say, assign me your claim and I'll get you a whole new roof. It'd end up in litigation, it increased. That's not what insurance is for. So of course, that's going to cause premiums to go up. It's going to cause costs to go up. And so doing that really eliminated something that was negatively impacting the market. And there would be neighborhoods where people would knock on doors, say, they didn't even have a storm or anything. They say, hey, I can get you a new roof. I can get you a new roof. Sign on the dotted line. Do this, do that. That was a scam. And that's not how you have a healthy market. Companies did not want to come to Florida because they wanted to, they didn't want to have to be dealing with that. We also created a temporary reinsurance to assist policyholders wrap. At that time in 22, the reinsurance market was out of control. This is a global market. It's not something Florida certainly can control. It's something that is impacted by things like the California wildfires and those devastating losses. So we wanted to make sure that if there was needed to be a backstop, that we were providing funding where companies could go, get some coverage, but then ultimately pay us back. I'm happy to say that really wasn't necessary ultimately for most of these companies. We still got $2 billion in my budget that I have under this for reserves. We don't anticipate having to use that. The reinsurance rates in 2024 were basically stable. I don't think it went up at all, maybe less than 1%. It went down. Reinsurance rates actually went down. So there wasn't a need to do this, but we wanted to have a backstop. And as you know, we have a lot of different things in Florida. We have a cat fund. We have things that are different than other states, just given the risk that we face. Then after the 2022 elections, there was major reform to take one of the biggest disincentives from businesses wanting to come to Florida and enter this market out of, and that was doing what's called one-way attorney's fees. So a one-way attorney's fee is if I sue you and I win, you pay me my attorney's fees. But if I sue you and you win, I don't have to pay you attorney's fees. that creates an incentive to litigate rather than have settlements and have claims adjudicated in a way that is less cost effective. So we were one of, if not the only state in the country that had a statute like that, and that was a big driver of the cost of insurance here. And when this reform passed, Florida represented 8% of homeowners insurance claims nationwide, but accounted for 78% of litigation expenses. The interesting thing about that in 21-22, the majority of those litigation expenses, Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties, which incidentally really haven't been affected in any major way by hurricanes. I know Dade got a little bit on Irma, but by and large, it's been probably almost 20 years since you've had major impact here in Dade County, and yet they were driving the insurance. So where is all this damage coming from if you didn't have, and it was because you were doing the attorney's fees. And it was all about giving the lawyers money rather than the actual policyholders. And there were some examples where lawyers are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars and the policyholders getting like 50 grand or something. How is that something that makes a lot of sense? And so that was a major, major reform. They also did things like clarify and make clear what bad faith claims were. They also made sure that citizens, property insurance holders, if a private carrier had a comparable policy, that the private carrier can take that policy out. And the reason is Citizens ultimately is backed by the taxpayers. If there was a major event that Citizens couldn't pay, in Florida law, Citizens has the authority to assess every single policy in Florida, non-citizens policy. So you may have renter's insurance, and they could assess your renter's insurance. You could have auto insurance. They could assess that. You could have private homeowners insurance. They could assess that. So Floridians who are not a part of Citizens could potentially get whacked if Citizens is not something that's stable. So what you've seen is people that have qualified have been taken out. I think 2024, there was 450,000 plus that went from Citizens to a private market. Incidentally, between, I think, about 25 to 40% of those takeouts in the private market actually had lower rates, which is surprising because people thought the rates would be a lot. So they were comparable. Some were higher, some were lower, but the market is much healthier as a result of doing that. We also we tried to use all the tools at the disposal, and the legislature was generous in authorizing and expanding this program called My Safe Florida Home. And what it does is it allows citizens who, primary residents, not the mansions, but middle-class people and lower, to get grants to be able to make improvements that will harden their homes and be more resilient in the face of these big weather events. And when people do that, more often than not, they get a decrease in their insurance premiums. It's also ultimately good for them to be able to do. So we've put through thousands of people on that. We did a big push this current fiscal year. A lot of people got the grants, but we've got people on the wait list. We just did this special session. A lot of it was focused on immigration. I wanted to do the hurricane, My Safe Florida Home Relief, and anybody that's on the waiting list, we wanted to get that funded so that they can make improvements to their home in time for this coming hurricane season. So I think that's something that's really, really good. But that's a program, given the market turmoil, given the inflation we were seeing, given everything that was going on, we wanted to do. And so we dedicated really significant resources to be able to provide that lifeline to Floridians all across the state. We've also beefed up in that bill in 2022. We've beefed up that that we've limited the time that an insurance company has to cancel your policy. At the end of the day, we want to have a good market. We don't want excessive litigations. But we want these companies to do what they're supposed to do. We don't want them gaming the system. We don't want them to be able to strategically drop people. So that's a much tighter window. We've also given regulators the ability to examine insurance companies' compliance in a real way with teeth. They can enhance punitive capabilities. We have more reporting requirements, and we've prohibited executives of impaired or insolvent companies from receiving bonuses or other golden parachutes. I mean, sometimes these companies go out and these guys come out with all this money. So you're not allowed to do that anymore. So you've seen real significant reforms to bolster consumer transparency for consumers And that's what we want. If somebody has damage and they're insured against it, we want a quick resolution and payment of the claim. If you didn't have storm damage, we don't want some lawyer coming, getting your claim and filing frivolous litigation either. And so you got to make sure that you're having a strong market, but that you have the transparency so you can hold companies accountable. And when companies run afoul of this, if you have 11 new businesses coming and you have 3 or 4 options, these bad actors, not only can they be held accountable punitively, but then people are going to want to drop that and they're going to want to go to other businesses. So that's where you are. So people are now looking at this in Florida and saying that Florida's market has stabilized. Compare California. Insurers are leaving California. They're fleeing. They don't want to be there because the government's policies have been very, very destructive. Who knows what's going to happen after these fires? There's certain things you can't control, but there's certain things that you can mitigate. If you look at Florida, our building codes have mitigated damage throughout hurricanes. And the most recent hurricanes, Ian, Idalia, and then the 2 we had this year, you could just look to see the newer construction, how that fared compared to some of the older construction. They can handle major hurricanes in a really, really good way. We've also done things to mitigate with our emergency response. We have Kevin Guthrie here, Division of Emergency Management. So there's things that you can do. We've added resiliency to some of our key infrastructure. Private sector has done that with substations. There's a whole host of things that you can do that are within your control that can mitigate. Ultimately, we can't say, we're not going to have a hurricane or we can stop a hurricane. As much as the media wants to act like, if you just say magic words, you will not have hurricanes. That's a lie. That's not true. California, though, they've had horrible forest management practices. We do controlled burns in Florida all the time. They don't do it. They really fall prey to ideology. They haven't let the water come the way it has. And so they've increased the risk of these major fires doing major damage. I think what we've done in Florida is we've taken action to mitigate the risk of these major tropical weather events, and that's a really, really good thing. So right now, Florida has 7.58 million active homeowners insurance policies. That's 130,000 more than the previous year. I mean, the media will sometimes say nobody will write insurance in Florida. That's just not true. The data doesn't show that. I know there may be some people that want to build mansions on places that are kind of, right there on the ocean that someone may not want to insure. But for rank and file folks, we have an increase of 130,000 policies. As I mentioned, 11 new companies have either entered the market or expanded their presence here. That is a sign.